Jinns do not have a cemetery, written by Elham Ghoreishi. In the stillness of the night, Yalda's curiosity led her to an ancient ritual unbeknownst to her. Nestled in her home near the bustling streets of Tehran, she stood in her bathroom, scissors in hand. The glint of the blades reflected the dim light as they opened and closed with a gentle snip. The silence of the night was her only companion, or so she thought. But as the scissors parted once again, the air shifted. A peculiar, almost earthy aroma wafted through the bathroom, unlike anything she had ever smelled. It was as if centuries of forgotten tales were encapsulated in that single scent. The small room seemed to contract, as if bracing for something unknown. Then, a shadow loomed behind the translucent curtain, vast and imposing. Yalda's heart raced, her fingers trembled. Every tale of jinns and spirits her grandmother had whispered to her as a child echoed in her ears. With a mix of fear and awe, she reached for the curtain. The fabric slid away with a whisper, revealing the entity that stood before her. It was a creature of myths, a jinn, towering and formidable. Its skin was the color of a desert sunset, deep red and unnerving. The jinn's eyes, wide with equal surprise, met hers. It wore nothing but a simple white linen cloth, its texture rough and ancient. A goatee adorned its chin, adding to its mystical aura. But what caught Yalda's attention the most were its feet, or rather, the lack thereof. In place of toes, it bore hooves, strong and dark, reminiscent of a wild horse. Atop its head, two short horns nestled within its hair, completing the otherworldly look. In that moment, frozen in time, Yalda's scream shattered the silence. She stumbled back, seeking refuge behind the curtain she had just pulled aside. Her mind raced with questions, fears, and a deep sense of wonder. What was this creature? Why had it appeared to her? And what would happen next in this unexpected encounter between two worlds? Trembling and soaked, Yalda stood under the shower long after the water had turned cold. Her mind grappled with what she had seen. It was just my imagination, she told herself, trying to muster the courage to step out of the bathroom. She turned off the shower and cautiously drew back the curtain. The bathroom was empty, the creature was gone. With a deep breath, she stepped out, wrapping herself in a towel. As she descended the stairs, a voice echoed from below, unfamiliar and tinged with panic. It was the creature, the jinn. In the name of God. Bismillah. Oh God, I was wrong. From now on, I will be a good elf. Please make this human disappear. I am afraid of humans, it pleaded. Yalda, who held no particular religious beliefs or superstitions, couldn't help but feel a surge of bravery at the jinn's fear. Standing at the top of the stairs, she called out, "Are you asking God to make me disappear? It's me who should be saying, in the name of God, for you to vanish." Hearing this, the jinn looked up, its eyes wide with surprise. They both spoke simultaneously, invoking Bismillah, and closing their eyes, each hoping the other would disappear. But when they opened their eyes, they were both still there, standing in Yalda's house. The jinn, bewildered and slightly embarrassed, and Yalda, a mix of fear, curiosity, and newfound boldness. In that moment, a strange understanding passed between them. Neither had vanished as they had hoped. It seemed that the ancient incantations had failed them both, or perhaps, brought them together for a reason yet unknown. Yalda, her voice steadier now, asked, "Who are you? And why are you in my house?" The jinn, now more composed, looked at her with a complex expression, one that hinted at a story yet to be told. In the dim light of the kitchen, Yalda sat wrapped in her towel, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief and wonder. She watched, almost in a trance, as the jinn named Zaktan paced back and forth. His nervous energy was palpable, every movement of his goatee and the flick of his narrow, hairy-tailed back conveyed his agitation. Breaking the silence, Zaktan began to speak. His voice, though deep, carried a hint of distress. "My name is Zoktan," he said, his eyes not meeting Yalda's. He recounted a tale that seemed as unreal as his appearance. He had been at a bachelor party, a celebration among his kind, when one of his friends, fueled by the night's revelry, claimed he wanted to summon a human, much like how humans often attempt to summon spirits. Zoktan, with a hint of embarrassment, admitted that he had scoffed at the idea. He didn't believe in humans. To him, they were just a myth, a tale told by the elderly Jinn to amuse the young. But as fate would have it, at the very moment he declared his disbelief, Yalda had appeared in her bathroom, summoned unintentionally by the snipping of scissors. As he paced and explained, Yalda sat silently, absorbing his words. Her mind struggled to grasp the reality of the situation. Here was a Jinn, a creature from the stories of her childhood, standing in her kitchen, talking about bachelor parties and disbelieving in humans. Zoktan finally stopped pacing and looked at Yalda. "And now, here we are," he said, a mixture of confusion and curiosity in his voice. "Two beings from worlds that were never supposed to meet." Yalda, still processing the surreal encounter, could only nod. Her silence wasn't born of fear anymore but of a deep intrigue about the being before her and the strange turn her life had just taken. Yalda sat silently, her eyes never leaving the figure of Zoktan, the Jinn who claimed to be as real as the air she breathed. The more she listened, the more she was convinced that this had to be an illusion, a figment of her imagination. How can this be real, she thought. She questioned the root of this vivid hallucination. It couldn't possibly be the effects of the glass of red wine she had indulged in before her shower. Could it be some unique form of mental illness that had suddenly manifested? Yalda comforted herself with the thought that her condition, if it indeed was a condition, didn't seem severe. She was aware of her perceptions, which in her mind, ruled out the severity of any potential mental illness. After all, she reasoned, true concern arises when one is oblivious to their own delusions. With these thoughts swirling in her mind, Yalda made a decision. She stood up gracefully and fetched 2 sedative pills from the medicine cabinet. She swallowed them, hoping they would help her escape this bewildering reality, even if just for a few hours. Zoktan watched in silence, his eyes wide with surprise. His expression was a mix of curiosity and concern as he observed Yalda preparing for sleep right before him. She settled herself on the sofa, her eyes briefly meeting Zoktan's. There was a silent acknowledgement of the bizarre situation they found themselves in. Just before succumbing to the effects of the sedatives, Yalda glanced at the clock. It was 11 p.m. on March 21, 2019. As her eyelids grew heavy, she wondered if the morning light would bring clarity to the night's strange events or if Zoktan, the Jinn, would just be a memory of a dream. With that last thought, she drifted into sleep, leaving Zoktan, the red-skinned Jinn, standing there, a silent guardian in the still of the night. Yalda opened her eyes to the morning light, only to be greeted by the unwavering gaze of Zoktan. The Jinn watched her intently, a mix of curiosity and frustration in his expression. "So, you finally woke up," Zoktan remarked with a hint of annoyance. "How careless you are. Aren't you going to try to make me your slave or something? My grandmother always said humans are cunning and selfish." He muttered to himself, pacing around the room, "Oh God, what do I have to do to get away from this human?" Yalda, ignoring his grumbles, got up and walked to the phone. She called her workplace, feigning a cold to get the day off. Then she dialed her psychologist, insisting on an urgent appointment. After hanging up, she started preparing breakfast, moving around the kitchen with a calmness that seemed to irritate Zoktan further. "You're so carefree," Zoktan exclaimed, trailing behind her. "How can you just go about your day like nothing's happened?" "Because you're not real," Yalda replied nonchalantly, spreading jam on her toast. "You're just in my mind." Zoktan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You mean to tell me, a 651-year-old Jinn, that I'm just an illusion in your head?" Yalda nodded in confirmation, taking a bite of her breakfast. Zoktan wrinkled his nose, making a face. "What is that smell? What are you eating? It's awful." Yalda, unfazed, continued eating her breakfast, the surreal conversation with the Jinn adding an unusual flavor to the start of her day. After breakfast, Yalda dressed up and headed for her car, Zoktan trailing behind her, his hooves clacking on the floor. She could hear him grumbling about human inventions and their odd smells. Yalda got into the car, trying to ignore Zoktan, who clumsily climbed in on the other side. He attempted to mimic her, pulling on the seatbelt, but his tail got caught in the door, eliciting a sharp yelp from him. Yalda couldn't help but laugh. "Wow, my brain really knows how to entertain me with this funny illusion," she said aloud, finding amusement in the bizarre situation. Zoktan, still fussing with his tail, continued to complain about the car's smell and the oddities of human transportation. They finally reached the doctor's office. Inside, Yalda narrated her experience to the psychologist. She occasionally glanced at Zoktan, who stood with his hands behind his back, sarcastically commenting on every detail Yalda shared. The doctor listened attentively, nodding along. "Yes, it seems like you're experiencing some kind of disorder," she said thoughtfully. "I'll write you some tests." At that moment, Zoktan, curious and mischievous, lifted a small vase from the doctor's table to inspect it. The vase appeared to levitate on its own. The doctor, witnessing this, let out a scream and fainted. Yalda, watching in disbelief, exclaimed, "Oh, come on. Now this is getting too real for an illusion." Yalda sat in the driver's seat, staring at Zoktan, who awkwardly sat facing the rear of the car, his tail wagging uneasily. "So, you're real, and you can move things," Yalda remarked, a tone of realization in her voice. Zoktan, struggling to adjust in the car seat, replied, "My grandmother always said humans are clueless, but I didn't believe her. I've been trying to figure out a way back since last night, but you just wouldn't listen." Yalda nodded, her mind racing. "So, when I was playing with scissors last night, it coincided with your little human summoning game, and that's why you're here?" "Unfortunately, yes," Zoktan sighed, looking a bit defeated. Yalda started the car. "Well, we're going to the cemetery." "The cemetery? Why? That's where humans bury their dead, right?" "Sounds creepy," Zoktan grimaced. "Yeah, that's right. Don't you guys have cemeteries?" Yalda asked, curious. "Nope," Zoktan shook his head. "When we Jinn die, our bodies just vanish. I heard somewhere that if you bury a Jinn's tail hair next to the oldest grave in a cemetery, the Jinn disappears," Yalda explained as they drove. The cemetery's atmosphere was eerie, and Zoktan looked visibly uncomfortable. They tried the ritual Yalda had mentioned, but half an hour later, they were back in the car, the attempt clearly unsuccessful. "Well, that didn't work," Yalda said, starting the engine again. Zoktan let out a frustrated huff. "Humans and their strange ideas." Yalda glanced at him. "Got any better ideas?" Zoktan just shook his head, looking out the window, his expression a mix of worry and thought. As they drove away from the cemetery, Yalda turned to Zoktan. "There's this old lady in town, a fortune teller. They say she's got connections with Jinns, writes magic and stuff. Maybe she can help us. Help me get rid of your constant grumbling. But first, I need to eat something," Yalda added, her stomach growling. "You eat a lot," Zoktan observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And you Jinn don't eat?" Yalda asked, glancing at him. "We eat 1 cucumber a day, that's it," Zoktan said. "Your world eats everything, even other creatures. We only have plants in our world." Yalda pulled up at a snack bar and ordered a hot dog sandwich and a salad. "Here, try the cucumbers in the salad. Just make sure no one sees them floating around," she said, handing him a piece. Zoktan, hesitantly at first, took a piece of cucumber. To his surprise, he found it delightful. Wow, these cucumbers taste way better than the ones in our world, he admitted, munching on another piece. Yalda chuckled, see, not everything in the human world is bad. Zoktan, now a bit more relaxed, nodded in agreement, I guess you're right. Finishing their meal, Yalda wiped her mouth, alright, let's go see this fortune teller. Fingers crossed she can help us sort this mess out. Zoktan, still nibbling on a cucumber slice, nodded, let's hope she can. The house was bustling with people as Yalda and Zoktan entered. A woman, adorned with gold, complained loudly about the parking situation in this part of Tehran. Her young child, engrossed in a tablet, added to the noise with his games. Ms. Masumi's secretary, likely her daughter-in-law, was busy sharing stories of the fortune teller's miraculous powers with a young woman. The prayers Ms. Masumi writes, they work wonders, she said, her speech slightly slurred due to a stuck tongue, a large mole noticeable on her nose. As Yalda and Zoktan found a spot on the floor, the secretary continued, a woman who couldn't have kids came here. Ms. Masumi wrote her a prayer, and now she's got triplets. People even call from abroad for her prayers. Zoktan listened, intrigued. A genie, he whispered to Yalda. Yeah, she says Ms. Masumi has a Jinn who helps her. A good one, apparently, Yalda whispered back. The Jinn's name is Zafra. Wanted to fight with Imam Hossein but wasn't accepted. It's all in this book, the secretary gestured towards a worn-out book on a shelf. Swear I'll go blind if I'm lying. Ms. Masumi is a saint. Yalda turned to Zoktan, think she can help us? In the crowded, dimly lit room of Ms. Masumi, the so-called fortune teller of Tehran, Yalda pushed her way through the objections of the waiting crowd. Zoktan, invisible to all but her, followed closely behind. They reached the inner sanctum, where Ms. Masumi sat surrounded by her mystical paraphernalia. Look, madam, Yalda said, her voice firm and carrying across the room, I have a genie. Can you send him back to his world or not? Don't waste my time if you can't. Ms. Masumi, taken aback by Yalda's audacity, responded with a scowl, what a rude girl. Wait your turn like everyone else. It was then that Zoktan, frustrated by the charade, decided to reveal his presence in his own way. With a flick of his hand, Ms. Masumi's prayer book levitated, flipping pages wildly in midair. The room erupted in chaos as the crowd scrambled for the door, tripping over each other in their haste. Once the room had emptied, Ms. Masumi's facade crumbled. Shaking and pale, she confessed, I'm a fraud. I've been lying to everyone. I did it to survive, to care for my family. Her voice cracked as she spoke of her addict son and her family's struggles. As Yalda and Zoktan exited the house, they were met with a spectacle. A woman adorned in gold jewelry was animatedly recounting the events to the gathered crowd. I saw it with my own eyes. The good genie of Ms. Masumi struck down the unbeliever with her prayer book. Ms. Masumi's daughter-in-law, her speech stuttering, echoed the sentiment, yes, it's true. A miracle. The crowd around them buzzed with excitement and awe, showering blessings upon Ms. Masumi, now more a saint than a scammer in their eyes. Yalda and Zoktan retreated to the car, the sounds of the crowd's praises fading behind them. Zoktan broke the silence first, humans have a strange way of twisting reality to fit their beliefs. Yalda, starting the car, replied thoughtfully, maybe it's not about the truth for them. Maybe it's about what they need to believe. As they drove away, the sky turned a deep shade of twilight, reflecting the blur of reality and myth that had enshrouded their day. Back in the car, Yalda dialed her friend Farnaz, her voice weary but hopeful. Hey Farnaz, do you know anyone who knows about other worlds? I need some help. Farnaz, always eager to sound sophisticated, replied, there's this guy in a village. He's like a scientific astrologer, predicts everything based on the universe and star movements. You into that kind of stuff? Yalda let out a small laugh, right now, I'm not sure what I believe in anymore. After hanging up, Zoktan, who had been awkwardly perched on the back of the car seat, chimed in. Humans are so strange. You think some village astrologer can unravel the secrets of the universe? If it's a real scientific issue, shouldn't you be calling some top scientists or something? Yalda sighed, starting the car. Honestly, Zoktan, I don't know what to think anymore. Let's just do some grocery shopping and clear our heads. We can figure this out tomorrow. In the small shop, Yalda was picking cucumbers for Zoktan, who was curiously sniffing various fruits, when she suddenly bumped into her boss, Mr. Rice. Mr. Rice, with a hint of irony, commented, "Ah, Mrs. Yalda, I heard you were sick today. Good to see you've recovered so quickly. You know, with your health, I wonder if you can handle the cold in Europe. We were thinking of sending you to Paris." Yalda, caught off guard but quick-witted, leaned in and whispered conspiratorially, "Mr. Rice, I've got a secret. I carry my father's spirit with me. A very vindictive spirit. He told me that if you send your sister's son to Paris instead of me, well, let's just say, it might not end well for you." At that moment, Zoktan, playing along, stealthily grabbed Mr. Rice's shoulders and gave him a vigorous shake. Yalda continued, "Oh dear grandfather's spirit, please, let go of Mr. Rice. I'm sure they'll send me to Paris." Mr. Rice, utterly terrified, stammered out, "Yes, of course, absolutely," before dashing out of the shop as fast as his legs could carry him. Yalda and Zoktan burst into laughter, the tension of the day momentarily forgotten. That should keep him thinking, Yalda chuckled. Zoktan, amused by the human antics, added, "You humans have such interesting ways of solving problems." As they left the shop, Yalda's spirits were lifted. The absurdity of the situation, the playful deceit, it all felt strangely exhilarating. Yalda, still laughing about their encounter with Mr. Rice, glanced at Zoktan. "You know, with all this craziness, why don't you just stay with me? You've been in your world for so long, maybe it's time for a change." Zoktan's laughter faded, and his expression turned stern. "What do you mean? To become your slave, like your pet or something?" he said, his voice tinged with anger. "Is that what humans do? Enslave others?" His tail began to flick rapidly, a sign of his growing agitation. Yalda, trying to lighten the mood, reached out and playfully slapped at his tail, which was swishing close to her face. "Oh, come on, I'm just joking. Don't be so serious." But her touch on his tail seemed to trigger something in Zoktan. He suddenly turned furious, lashing out. "Don't touch my tail," he roared, the anger in his voice startling Yalda. Caught off guard, Yalda jerked the steering wheel. The car swerved violently, losing control. She tried to regain her bearings, but it was too late. The car veered off the road, tumbling down into a valley. As they descended, time seemed to slow. Yalda's heart raced with fear and regret, realizing too late the consequences of her actions. Zoktan, his anger replaced by shock, braced himself. The car crashed into the valley below, the world around them erupting in chaos. Yalda, nursing her injured hand, struggled out of the wrecked car. She then helped Zoktan, who was trying to disentangle his horn stuck in the car's roof. "Where are we?" Yalda gasped as she looked around. The landscape was bizarre, with trees in shades of pink and other surreal colors. A strange bird perched on a branch, watching them curiously. "Is this the world of Jinns?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder and confusion. Zoktan, equally puzzled, shook his head. "No, this isn't it. We don't have birds in our world. Where are we?" As they surveyed their surroundings, they noticed eerie, demon-like creatures slowly approaching them. Yalda glanced at Zoktan, her eyes wide with fear. "Do you believe in demons?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Zoktan, his gaze fixed on the approaching figures, replied, "Not until today." Yalda checked her watch. It was still March 21st, 11 p.m. Time seemed to have stood still, yet everything had changed. "Looks like we're not in Kansas anymore," Yalda muttered under her breath, a nervous attempt at humor in the face of the unknown. Zoktan, despite the gravity of their situation, couldn't help but let out a weary chuckle. "We really need to get better at landing," he said. As the creatures drew nearer, Yalda and Zoktan braced themselves, uncertain of what awaited them in this strange new world. The end. Elham Ghoreishi, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing and giving it a like. Your support means a lot. Thank you.